PNR Networks is a member of Patreon. Show your love for our shows by joining our ongoing fundraising campaign and get some fantastic perks in return. Check it out and become a Patreon sponsor. You can sign up at patreon.com, patreon.com/PNR Networks. And thanks for your support.
This podcast is a member of the Blueberry Network. Blueberry. No E's. That's Blueberry, BLUBRRY.com. Blueberry.com.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.
It's Kim versus TC in the battle of the lists.
My list is better.
My list is better.
My list is better.
No, it's not. My list is better.
Kim or TC, who has the better list? From Subject Cinema, this is Front Row 5 and 10 with Kim Brown and TC Kirkham.
Hey everybody, welcome to another week here on Front Row 5 and 10, brought to you by the good people that bring you Subject Cinema. That would be me and him, the me being Kim Brown.
And the him being TC Kirkham. Hello everybody.
Hi.
It is September 5th. We're officially in September 2019.
Yep.
And of course we're glad you came along for all of our weird little lists. Don't forget, we could use your ideas for lists.
Yep.
And if we use your idea, you get a prize, you get on the show, you get on the website, a little bit of everything.
We definitely want your ideas for stuff. We'll definitely, give them a try and do a good list for them, we hope.
And you can drop us a line at frontrow@PNRNetworks.com or subjectcinema@PNRNetworks.com.
Yep.
And as of this week, we're not going to tell you ahead of time what we're going to do. You can know that they're going to be all entertainment stuff, usually. And so that way you have to tune in to see what we're doing.
Yes.
It's a little cheap ploy, but hey, it works.
We hope it'll work.
We hope it'll work. So this was your pick.
Yes.
This week.
Yes. So this is my pick. And my pick for this week's list, yours and mine, are the top 10 lists of, in our opinion, the top 10 most tragic or misunderstood villains. And this is through all forms of media.
Well, I actually went with the word sympathetic.
Okay,
So
that works as well. Some of the mine I would definitely consider sympathetic.
These fit into that too, though.
Yeah, some of these are they're people that, or beings. I suppose I should be a little bit more rounded there. They're beings that we're not excusing the things that they do that are bad. We're definitely not excusing them, but we are saying, well, I can understand how they got to this point. At least in most cases.
Sort of.
Yeah.
In some of them.
Mm-hmm. So since it was my idea for a list, you should go first.
Oh, goody. I'm starting off with the goofy one at the beginning.
Okay.
Because I had trouble. I was stuck with 9. And then I thought, I'm going to think of a few more. And I finally found one. So I decided to go totally silly with the final one. And it's number 10 on my list.
Okay.
Sheldon Plankton from SpongeBob SquarePants.
Okay.
Plankton is a plankton. He is the immediate competitor of Mr. Krabs at his...
Actually, isn't he pretty large for a plankton? Because aren't they so small that you can't see them normally?
He is Mr. Krabs' chief competitor.
Yes.
Where Krabs runs... What's the name of that?
The Krusty Krab.
Krusty Krab. It's been a while since I've watched SpongeBob.
And Plankton
runs the chum bucket across the street. Sheldon and his computer wife, Karen. That was one of the funniest things I've ever seen was the episode where they announced what his first name was.
Yeah.
But he's not really to do a quote from a famous Disney movie, he's a bad guy, but he's not a bad guy. He does have sympathetic areas in some places. He can be. There are several episodes where he actually becomes friends for a time with SpongeBob, of all people. And he is in it for the buck, and he's in it for the recipe to the Krabby Patty, which is like killing him in the competition. Mm-hmm. But overall, he just wants to be a success, and he goes about it the wrong way. So that's why I put him on the list, because I just thought it would be goofy to start things off, because some of these are so serious. Okay. Number 10, Sheldon Plankton from SpongeBob SquarePants.
Okay. Number 10 on my list is a character that we only saw once in the canon of the show. That has since changed, I believe, thanks to, fan movies and things like that. My number 10 is Charlie Evans from the original Star Trek episode Charlie X. Charlie was the only survivor of a accident, a spaceship that crashed on this one planet that people assumed that, everyone had died. It turned out that everyone hadn't died. There was one survivor, this young man named Charlie. When he is found by the Federation, he's found by a different ship before the Enterprise. When he's transferred to the Enterprise, there's obviously something very strange about the fact that this very sweet-natured young kid, he seems very nice and pleasant, naive, and kind of, this kid apparently raised himself and kept himself alive with things that he could eat on this planet, and taught himself to speak and stuff like that. But the people who rescued him want to get away from him as fast as possible, but they're very friendly about it. But they're obviously terrified of him, and we find out why. The reason is because Charlie was actually raised by the beings that live on the planet, this race of non-corporeal beings, that in order to survive, they imbued Charlie with their psychic abilities. And when you think about the idea of what happens in a normal teenager's head, just your average teenager, when they, the whole nobody understands me door slamming phase and everything else, picture all of that. Now picture it with the power of a god behind it. Charlie causes some major havoc on the Enterprise before this race comes back to collect him, because they're like, oh crap, he's gone, we need to do something about this. They show up and they're like, we need to bring him back to our world, or he's going to kill people in your world. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the episode, Charlie's begging to stay because he can't even touch these other beings. And when he disappears, there's no relief. There is kind of relief, but it's more sorrow, because this is a scared kid. That's all he is at the end of it, is a scared kid. Portrayed wonderfully by Robert Walker Jr. He is the antagonist of the episode, but damn it if you don't feel sorry for him. My number 10, Charlie Evans from the original Star Trek series.
I suppose. Never really thought of him as a tragic figure.
You can't watch I'm sorry, the end of that episode breaks my heart.
That's not one of my favorite episodes.
The end of the episode breaks my heart. But that's just me.
Okay. My number 9 is a bit of an odd pick to some people, but there is a very large sympathetic wave running through the character, because we don't really know what happened to make him the way he is, but we also know that he's still tortured by the decision to do what he had to do.
Okay.
My number 9 is Kylo Ren from the Star Wars universe, played by Adam Driver. What?
Okay.
What made Ben Solo turn on his family and friends and become Kylo Ren?
We don't know.
We don't know. What happened?
We don't know from the movies anyway. The expanded universe and books and things, they may offer something, but
the
going
character
straight by the movie
has a temper level that he's still throwing temper tantrums, and
with a lightsaber, that's not a good combination.
In some hilariously funny scenes in the Star Wars movies, but he also is intrigued by Rey and her apparent being the new apparent heir to the throne for the Skywalkers, according to what we've seen so far. Sort of. You don't agree?
No, I mean...
She's the Warzy. I'm looking at
her.
No.
I understand where you're coming from, I suppose.
What happened to Ben to drive him away from Leia and Han? What happened to Ben to drive him to turn against his master, his Uncle Luke?
What happened to him that made him commit one of the ultimate crimes? Mm-hmm. I mean,
well, we know that the dark side of the Force is involved. Probably Snoke, and very possibly, according to what we've seen in the trailers for The Rise of Skywalker,
a very old enemy that has come back.
Yeah. So it could be interesting, but there's also sympathetic feelings there, because you can see that inside he still has a little twinge of guilt as what happened with what happened to Han in The Force Awakens, and he also feels that same twinge of guilt when he feels his mother in the second movie, which was
Last Jedi.
Last Jedi. You can see it in his face. Something is going on, and hopefully they'll end that and figure out what's going on at the end of this new movie.
Wow.
Number 9, Kylo Ren from the Star Wars movies.
Wow. Woo. Okay. Number 9 on my list is a person that the reason that I would definitely put him as a tragic villain, because his turn to villainy didn't come out of greed or lust for power. It came out of pain. And pain is a very basic emotion, and pain makes us do bad things sometimes, My number 9 is Raul Silva from the James Bond film Skyfall. We find out in Skyfall that this terrorist who seems hell-bent on bringing down the British Secret Service, and specifically bringing down the head of it, a woman that is known as M, played by Dame Judi Dench. We're not worthy. Mm-hmm. We find out that Raul's backstory, spoiler alert for this whole list, by the way, forgot to say that earlier.
Well, I think they know that.
At one point, he actually was part of the British Secret Service under his true name, Tiago Rodriguez. That he was a spy that was working for Queen and Country, just like James Bond. But because when he was on a mission, he decided to work a little harder and did some stuff that wasn't very legal, and wound up getting caught by the Chinese government, who are not people you want to get on the bad side of. He was, let's call it what it is, he was abandoned by his government. They said, okay,
the secretary will disavow any knowledge of your actions.
Yeah. They basically traded his life away for the lives of other agents. They didn't try and rescue him or anything like that, and they assumed he was dead. And he wasn't. The Chinese probably made him wish he was, and the failed suicide attempt and the results of which we
squicks her out.
We see in graphic detail in Skyfall that made me want to run screaming for my mom. But played
you should have felt the iron grip that came around my arm when that was going on in the theater.
Oh man. But Javier Bardem's performance as Silva is, he's become a very terrible person and has done terrible things. But like I said, they're coming from a place of pain. At the end of the day, and I know some people may not want to admit this or not, we are animals. At the end of the day, there is a reason the phrase human animal exists. And when you hurt an animal, it will lash out. Mm-hmm. And that's where I feel like he's coming from, this place of pain, this place of being abandoned, being left behind, and trying to get back a measure of revenge. So my number 9, Raul Silva, ni Tiago Rodriguez from Skyfall.
Yes, everything was great about that movie, except the theme song.
Oh, here we go.
Skyfall. Okay.
I know.
I love Adele, but that song sucks. Anyway, my number 8 is one of the classic Batman villains, and it just has to be the one that I see as tragic. There's a lot of, some of them have others.
There are so many tragic villains in the Batman mythos.
But I don't know a lot of them.
It's ridiculous.
And I do know my number 8, Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze is Victor Freeze. And I'm talking a combination of everything because they've changed his story a couple of times. Originally, at one point, he was trying to save his wife. At one point, he's bitter because he accidentally killed her. And so now that's how come he lives in that suit. We are not talking about the Arnold Schwarzenegger version from Batman and Robin.
Although that is what happens.
It is, yeah. But he turned to crime as a way to try and cure his wife of what he has also. This low body temperature, which causes him to be,
he can't exist without the suit that he wears.
I really wish they'd gone with Patrick Stewart for that when they did it in the movies.
I still think Patrick Stewart would have made a better Scarecrow. But
well, he would have, but I thought Patrick Stewart would have been great based on how he looks in the comics. Arnold just overdid the puns, and it was just way. Joel, can your writers next time? It was. He's a very villainous guy. I mean, he's killed people. He's done horrible things. He hates Batman and Robin because they're always stopping him and putting him in Arkham Asylum. But he never stopped loving his wife. And there's something sweet about that. And it's tragic that he can't find a way legally to finish what he needs to do to try and cure her.
Yeah, and himself.
So, number 8, Mr. Freeze from the Batman franchise.
That's funny because my number 8 is also from a comic franchise, but it's from the other famous one. My number 8 is Dr. Otto Octavius, also known as Dr. Octopus. I want to bring up specifically the Alfred Molina portrayal in Spider-Man 2, which before that point, I never really felt very much sympathy for Doc Ock. There just never seemed to be that streak of tragedy about the character to me. But Alfred Molina's portrayal of Dr. Octavius, this very brilliant and very nice. He's a very nice man. When the movie starts, he's happily married. He's this really smart dude.
He's egomaniacal to a T.
Well, I don't think so. He's a very smart guy. And when you have people telling you how brilliant you are, most people are going to be like, well, okay, maybe I am pretty smart. But he was very nice, and he was, like I said, happily married, beautiful wife, and everything went wrong with this experiment that he was doing with these, tentacles, for lack of a better term, these metallic tentacles that would help someone to do experiments where, you couldn't be in the room with something that could, give you cancer or burn your flesh off or flat out kill you.
Right.
Stuff went wrong, his wife died, and these arms got fused to his body and also seemed... Now, this I'm not entirely certain about. Because it was implied that these arms almost were possessing him. Now, that might have been his own insanity imbuing the arms with that. Or it might have actually happened. Who the heck knows? It's a comic book movie, so...
And specifically a Sam Raimi comic book movie.
But... And he does... When he becomes Dr. Octopus, he does some bad stuff. And he's, and he's nuts. I mean, there's no other way to put it. But at the end of the film, when he redeems himself and dies... Also, while saying, when I refuse to die as a monster, or I'm paraphrasing the line. Yeah. I'm sorry. I was sitting there going, okay, I'm not going to cry. Oh, damn. Here we go. I think that he is, in that iteration, a very tragic character. He is the antagonist of the film, but I felt for him. I mean, that's got to do, I think, more, like I said, with Mr. Molina's amazing performance. But my number 8, tragic villain, not really misunderstood, but tragic. Dr. Otto Octavius, a.k.a. Dr. Octopus.
Okay. My number 7's another one that's going to come from left field for a lot of people, because he's always so thought of as such a nasty guy in where he's from.
Okay.
Although, other than he's from a movie series and now a TV series, he started off as the most obnoxious bully on the planet, and yet you still, in the second movie in the original trilogy, you get a glimpse of that's not quite the case. Maybe there's something else going on. And now we see him in a completely different light in a brand new YouTube series that makes the history of these characters come alive again for a new generation. My number 7 is Johnny Lawrence from The Karate Kid. This is the character played by William Zabka. Johnny is an obnoxious, out-and-out bully to Daniel LaRusso in the first film. In the second film, after Daniel has beaten him, we see Miyagi actually save his butt after Kreese starts to beat him up. And you actually see fear in Johnny's eyes and know that there's something else going on besides the bullying is triggered
being
by
an
something.
alpha male.
In the new series Cobra Kai, which premiered last year on YouTube and which has been their biggest all-time hit, not surprisingly with its built-in audience of our age people that remember the original movies, he came back down and out and restarted Cobra Kai and reignited his feud with Daniel. Both William and Ralph Macchio have returned to their roles, and they both have their own kids, each of whom they have estranged and are now with the other guy. And I haven't sat down and actually watched the show because I'm kind of waiting for it to end so I can just binge the whole thing at once, because I was a huge fan of the first two movies. I actually saw Karate Kid 2 4 times at the theater. I've always thought that there was more to Johnny than what we see on the surface, and in the new series you actually get a chance to see it. There are a lot of insecurities there. He had a hellish home life. He's trying to get his back on his feet after several major screw-ups in his life. And, of course, as is Johnny's usual modus operandi, he's going about it in not necessarily the perfect way, especially now in the second season when Kreese is back in the picture. I have always loved William Zabka. I wish he'd had a more successful career after Karate Kid, but he kind of got stuck in that role and played a couple of similar characters and then disappeared, because he brought a lot of life to Johnny, and Johnny is the bad guy you want to hate so bad, and yet at the end of the film, the first film, he still tells Daniel congratulations after winning that, after he wins that karate tournament. Number 7, Johnny Lawrence from the Karate Kid series and the new series Cobra Kai.
Okay. Number 7 on my list, I would consider both tragic and misunderstood. He's misunderstood by the characters in his universe, and he's tragic because he was pretty much doomed from the second he saw what would eventually be the cause of his destruction. My number 7 is Smeagol, who became known as Gollum from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. We actually first get introduced to Gollum in the book before the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Hobbit, where he is this creepy, scary creature that runs into Bilbo Baggins, and Bilbo gets out of this contest of riddles with his life and also with the Precious, which is, as we find out, is a ring.
Go ahead, do it.
What?
What you always do.
My precious. Ow.
She's too good at that.
I don't know how Andy Serkis does that all the time. But In the Hobbit, we really didn't get much of his backstory. He was just another obstacle for Bilbo to overcome, granted a slimy, creepy one. And we didn't really know what the deal with this ring was, other than, oh, neat, it turns people invisible. We didn't really find out about the ring and his background until, the Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, Return to the King.
We didn't really get into his background until the very opening of Return to the King.
That's true. The movies, but the books are
different. But the movies, for those of you who've seen the movies, don't get confused. They're different.
Right,
big differences between the two, as I'm sure our Chris would tell us if he was still listening. Hi, our Chris.
Hi, our Chris. The thing is, this ring was actually, when it was found, it wasn't found by him. It was found by his friend when they were out fishing, because Smeagol at one point was a being much like a hobbit. They were a different race of beings, but close to a hobbit, as Gandalf explains to Frodo, and or Bilbo, I don't remember which. And this ring it was. I'm sorry. This ring winds up being found by his friend, and he's so overcome with want of this ring that he strangles his friend, and his life goes on a complete downward slide from there. Yeah. And the thing is, he's such a pitiful being. I mean, at one point this was somebody's child at one point. I mean, the parallels you can draw between this character and his addiction to the ring, and someone who has a child who is addicted to drugs, it's very easy to draw a parallel when you watch someone you care about being consumed by this need. I mean, the second he got a look at that ring, he was done, because he's messing with stuff that he doesn't understand, that is way more powerful than him, because that ring is basically evil in a little tiny gold ring. And I just felt bad for him. I just felt awful for him. I mean, not to the point where I was like, oh, I want to hug you, I feel bad. I was like, well, I'd want to wrap you in a blanket and then hug you. I'd hug you, but I don't want to touch you, if that makes any sense. I just felt sorry for him. I mean, when he dies, I felt bad that he died, but I was also like, that's really the only option.
At that point, he was so far gone.
He was so gone. There was no other redemption other than death. And I hope that in death he found peace. So my number 7 is Smeagol, or Gollum, from the Lord of the Rings and from The Hobbit.
Okay, just a minute, folks. Okay.
What was all that?
I'm erecting my blast shield because I'm about to get pummeled for putting him this low on my list. Number 6, Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader from the Star Wars universe. See? Already coming at me. Can you hear the big thumps going against the wall? He's only number 6 for a reason. I feel that Darth is more sympathetic in the long run, and it really isn't because of the character. It was because of the way they portrayed Anakin in the prequels, particularly Hayden Christensen's performance. Anakin could have been this really awesome, truly tragic figure, and instead he turned into this emo, whiny brat that you couldn't stand throughout most of Clone Wars and with Revenge of the Sith.
Revenge of the Sith.
I didn't have a problem with Jake Lloyd's portrayal that much, although he was a bit precocious.
Those were the lines, not him.
I know that. They both did what they were told to do.
Yeah.
I think Hayden Christensen is a tremendously underrated actor who I have seen in so many good things.
Yeah.
And I really feel bad that he's gotten saddled with the blame for the failure of the prequels. But it's like the character of Darth Vader, where we learn more about the fact that who he is in the long run, and how he became that way, is truly tragic. And the fact that he turns back in time to save his son, Luke Skywalker, from terrible fate at the hands of Emperor Palpatine, is really something. The problem is, when you watch the sequels, it's kind of hard to feel sympathy for him. The only place I actually feel sympathy for Anakin is in the Clone Wars animated series. I can't deal with... I love that show, and I think it's my favorite of all the outside projects, and I just don't like the way... Because you understand where it's going and what's happening to him, and how Palpatine's getting into his head in the first movie, in the second movie, and then finally into the... I mean, his performance in Revenge of the Sith is great, except for 2 or 3 scenes which drive me up the wall. But the character overall is very sympathetic, because at the end he still realized he could beat this and come back. What I'm hoping Kylo will do. Anyway, and Adam Driver played it much better. The character is written much better. I have to put him that low, and I know he's going to be higher on your list. Number 6, Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader from Star Wars.
No, I'm not upset at all. It's your list. Can't fault that.
Can I take this down now?
Yeah, take it down. Number 6 on my list always bothers me when people refer to him as a villain. Simply because he didn't ask for this. He didn't ask for any of it. My number 6 is Frankenstein's monster, specifically from the Universal series of films, portrayed brilliantly by Boris Karloff. We're not worthy.
In most of them.
Not all of them, but Frankenstein's monster is, in my opinion, he is usually considered the villain of most pieces, because he's this big, scary guy that's basically made of sewn up corpse parts and came to life from lightning and blah, blah, blah. My whole thing is that this being didn't ask for any of this.
No.
This being was brought to life, and its creator turned on it almost immediately because it didn't turn out the way they wanted it to. Now, take for a moment the idea. Now, I realize some people might say, you're really reaching here, Kim.
What
if you take the idea that you have a father, that their child is born, they're presented with their child, his nose is too big, I reject him. You'd be like, you are the biggest mother bleeping bleep on the whole bleeping planet, and you should be thrown off a cliff.
So it's Tim Burton's Penguin. Okay.
But it's basically the same thing. This is a creature that was born, and its creator immediately rejects it. Because it isn't the perfection that he wanted it to be. And all this being wants is to be loved. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't make some very bad choices. I mean, especially if you watch, the original Frankenstein, the whole scene, which thank goodness somebody finally thought, we need to put this in, where the monster meets the little girl, and there's the whole scene with the flowers and all that stuff, and at the end of it, the little girl winds up getting drowned. It is an accident. He doesn't intend to murder this child.
It's not an accident, but he doesn't understand that that's different.
He doesn't.
That's a difference between that.
Well, his thing is, you can tell if you watch the scene and watch it closely, you can tell what's going on in his head. You can almost see it like word bubbles. Mm-hmm. He's thinking, pretty things float. Little girl is pretty. Little girl will float. Toss. That doesn't work. And he runs away in panic. And my whole thing is, like I said, I find him really tragic. I mean, there's this one, I keep jumping back to the original film, but there's also this one part in Bride of Frankenstein, almost immediately at the end, where, the bride's been created and she rejects him immediately, and it's not a nice rejection. He's not friend zoned or anything. She just screams. And he is going to destroy the castle that they're in with himself, the bride, and this evil doctor, Dr. Pretorius. he says, "We belong dead." And the last shot of him is him with tears running down his face. And how that doesn't break people's hearts, I'll never understand. I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm some big badass. I have never been afraid of this character. I've always wanted to run up to him and give him the biggest, squishiest hug. And I know that I am nuts, but still, I always felt he was tragic. My number 6, Frankenstein's monster.
My number 5, we've already talked about. I don't really need to go into it because she covered the entire gamut. Alfred Molina's portrayal of Dr. Otto Octavius, Dr. Octopus in the Spider-Man franchise, specifically Spider-Man 2.
Wow.
Great character, great way of playing it. Made me a fan of Alfred's for life. I wasn't really that familiar with him stuff up to that point. But I don't really think I need to say anything because you hit all the big points, you know?
Sorry.
All the wife and death and blah, 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 and the arms took him over and came back and redeemed himself at the end, and he said, you know, I refuse to die a monster, blah, blah, blah. That's all I need to say.
That it breaks your heart. That scene just breaks your heart at the end. Number 5 on my list is somebody from, it's funny how we keep bouncing back and forth between comic companies. My number 5 is the only woman on my list, Dr. Harleen Quinzel, also known as Harley Quinn, who made her debut as part of one of the greatest animated series in the history, and I will fight you on that, Batman the Animated Series. Harley, to me, is a tragic character because she is a woman who is the thing that bothers me is that, and makes her so sad, in my opinion, is she's a very smart woman. She's a very smart woman. But she has fallen under the sway of the Joker, and she really, honest to goodness, believes that he loves her. And
depending on the iteration,
depending on the iteration, he's tolerant of her. I don't know if he ever really. I don't know if he loves anyone.
The Suicide Squad Joker was quite much in love with her.
I don't know
the way Jared Leto played it.
Well.
I also think the Joker in the Batman, the animated series, not Batman,
I know the later one,
was in love with her.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I just feel very sorry for her because she is a smart person and she's a beautiful woman and I don't think this is being melodramatic, literally throwing her life away, chasing after a guy who might and has taken out his anger on her because he can't beat the Batman.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember one of the episodes from the animated series was called Mad Love, and there was also a graphic novel. At the end of the episode, she's been brought back to Arkham. She's had the hell beat out of her by the Joker at different points during this. She's telling herself, I'm not going to fall for him again. I'm not going to, he's this, that, and the other thing. And then she looks and sees that somehow he's gotten a vase smuggled into her cell that says, with a flower that says, get well soon. And she's like, he's an angel. And I'm just like, I want to run my head into a wall. It breaks my heart. It's like anybody out there who has a friend in a relationship that someday somebody's going to wind up in the hospital. And it breaks your heart. It really breaks your heart. My number 5, Dr. Harleen Quinzel, a.k.a. Harley Quinn from the Batman franchise.
I think it's interesting that she is the only original character from the animated series that has become so ingrained in the Batman franchise mythos. I mean, they introduced so many new ones on the TV series, and maybe 2 of them stuck around for a little while, and that was it.
She was just supposed to be a one-off, and people were so
went nuts.
What?
And that was largely due to the great writing and Arlene Sorkin's incredible performance.
And her chemistry with Mark Hamill and as voice actors was just off the charts.
Again, my number 4 you've already talked about to extent great life, so I don't need to go into it. It's Gollum from The Lord of the Rings.
Wow.
I don't find him. My feelings about him is that he becomes sympathetic at one real big arc and then doesn't, because he's so obsessed with the ring. Mm-hmm. It's only in that little tiny period that happens in the Two Towers where he really gets the film version, where he really starts to come back around and starts to think of himself as Smeagol again because of Frodo. Sam's not any help with that.
No.
But it's an interesting take, and when Frodo betrays him because he has no choice to
inadvertently.
Do so. No, it's not inadvertently. He's forced to do it or get killed.
Yeah,
Faramir's ready to slit his throat.
Yeah.
And he wants to save him, and the only way to save him is to let him you know.
Because Faramir was being a bit of a dick at that point.
He was,
in the
but
movie.
he was trying to live up to his brother's reputation.
Yeah.
Which we find out later.
Yeah. And his father was an a-hole.
Yeah. From that point on, he lost that redeeming quality and was out scheming to kill both of them. So, but I
by
think
a spider.
Andy Serkis's incredible motion capture and voice work in the role in the film was incredible. I've tried to read the books. I have tried and tried to read the books. I just can't get through them. I don't know why. I started trying when I was 16 because everybody else around me was reading The Hobbit. And I couldn't. I didn't get into them until the films came out. So, I even tried after the films came out. Kim bought me a box set of the 3 Lord of the Rings books, and I got through maybe 4 chapters of the first book, and nope, can't do it. But I love the movie version. Sorry, R. Chris. Number 4, Gollum from the Lord of the Rings franchise.
Number 4 on my list is, this person, in my opinion, is the absolute definition of a tragic villain. And again, it's because of his background. If he had been in different circumstances, you wonder what kind of person he would have been and what he would have done with the gifts that he has, because they are gifts. My number 4 is Eric Lenscher, who is known to the world at large as Magneto from the X-Men. Eric is a World War II concentration camp survivor. His parents were killed in a camp, and he grew up in a camp and was rescued from a camp in whichever iteration you're dealing with, because it's, retcon. But my whole thing is, if you wonder what would have happened if Eric had been a kid in the farmlands of Kansas and had been raised by parents that were allowed to, love him and be good parents and not have to worry about the shadow of war and hatred and prejudice and, all of that stuff. You wonder what would have happened to that boy who had grown up as a person should in an environment of peace and love and family, and not death and hatred and war. That is why Eric Lenscher became Magneto, because the world that he knew could not or would not understand people with the gifts that mutants have, and view those gifts as something to be feared and hated. And it's really awful, because, it's like, what would have happened if somebody had been able to get to this person and get them out of there and be like, hey, you have these amazing powers and that's awesome, and let's figure out how to make the world a better place, and a place where you don't have to feel afraid. Because that's where all of that comes from, inside of him. All of that whole mutant superiority, blah, 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 blah. That's from fear. That's from the fear of they're going to come and get me, so I have to hurt them before they hurt me. Mm-hmm. And when you think about it, it's like, oh, shoot, that is really awful, and it sucks, and it's not fair. So that's why he's my number 4, because I really feel bad. I mean, if you put me face to face with this character, I know that most people would be all like, save me, save me, save me. I would just be like, dude, I am so sorry. On behalf of the rest of the people on this planet who are just stupid, normal Homo sapiens like me, I am so sorry at all the shit that happened to you.
Language?
Well, you know.
No, not well, you know.
Well, yeah, but I'm not perfect, so. My number 4, Magneto, aka Eric Lesher from the X-Men.
Okay.
Okay?
I'm going to go a completely different direction than you did with my number 3. Different character, but same movie.
Alrighty.
My number 3 is Henry Frankenstein from the original Frankenstein film. Many people think of him as a bad guy.
You totally can't see that, but I'm raising my hand right now.
You don't feel that he's
and I'm about to be told how wrong I am.
No. In the beginning, Henry is obsessed with creating this creature.
He's obsessed with creating life.
Like, wants to create life. We see that when he actually does give the monster life. But you're wrong. He does not turn on his creation immediately. He does not. He is worried about his creation, but he may never have turned on him if his assistant Fritz hadn't tortured the poor creature into becoming violent after accidentally putting a violent brain in him. Mm-hmm.
Also Fritz's fault.
Screw
you, Dwight Fry. You wreck everything.
Different movie. Anyway, I feel that at that point, Henry starts to realize exactly what he's done. That this may not have been the best idea in the world. And I don't think at any time he really truly wants to see the creature destroyed. He would still like to teach him, to keep him so that he could learn to be nonviolent, so things would go on. But the way that the brain is reacting is not working. We see that again in The Bride of Frankenstein at the very beginning. He's kind of, vowed off of that stuff.
Yeah, because Dr. Pretorius's whole thing is, help me do this, and Henry's all like, no. And he eventually does help, but it's under duress.
Right.
So I see where you're coming from with that.
He's not such a bad guy, and he cares deeply about his fiancée and wants her to stay away from there, so she'll be away from. And he's very, I'm sure, heartbroken at the death of his professor friend.
Yeah. So you're just going with the Colin Clive version
I'm going with
of Dr.
the
Frankenstein.
movie 1930 or 31 film version.
You're not talking the Peter
Clive.
Cushing version, because he is a straight up monster.
Peter Cushing is Victor Frankenstein.
Yeah, that's true.
I didn't say Victor Frankenstein.
No, you didn't.
Henry Frankenstein from the original Frankenstein film and Bride of Frankenstein.
Okay, you changed my mind. I understand where you're coming from with that. I do. That's a good point. My number 3, you've actually already mentioned. My number 3, and this definitely falls on the tragic villain side of things again. Dr. Victor Freeze, aka Mr. Freeze. Again, I'm going with Batman the Animated Series. I know that...
You don't have to be qualified, honey.
I know that 3 times before that he'd already appeared on the Adam West.
Not a canon version, though.
And I'm not the Adam West version, which I love, but I'm not going by that.
That's strictly for camp fun.
Yeah. Voiced by the late, great Michael Anasara. His Victor Freeze is such you really feel so much pity for him, even though he's doing stuff that you're like, okay, that's illegal and violent, and whoa, that was really bad, and all this stuff like that. But when you know that this guy became like this because he was trying to save his wife, and he was using his business's, stuff to do it with, and he probably shouldn't have done that, but the hell with it, it's his wife. He becomes this being by accident because his boss is a jerk and starts just unplugging stuff and almost kills the poor man's wife. And now he's stuck in this suit. He can never, he's telling Batman at one point he can't feel the sun on his face. He can't, he can't hold his wife's hand, even if she was, somehow well. And it's just...
Well, he can't do that. He just has to have the glove on.
Well, yeah, but it's not the same thing.
No.
And it's just sad. I mean, I know we're always supposed to cheer for Batman because he's Batman, unless it's from All-Star Batman and Robin. But, sorry. A little better there. My number 3, tragic, such a tragic villain. Dr. Victor Freeze, a.k.a. Mr. Freeze, specifically from Batman, the animated series.
My number 2, you've already mentioned. And I have to say that I can't... besides the incredible history in the comics, my version is strictly from the television and movie portrayals of the character. Because I know there's a tremendous backstory and he's very sympathetic in that way. But I'm thinking of the way I know it best.
Okay.
Magneto from X-Men.
All right.
And I also have to separate. I don't care what 20th Century Fox does. There is no way in hell Michael Fassbender grows up to be Ian McKellen. They're just not. They are two completely different characters.
Actually, technically, wouldn't if he grows old to be Ian McKellen? I mean,
fine.
Michael Fassbender's already grown up.
Fine. Okay, fine.
Hi, Michael.
Whatever.
Hi, Ian.
Eric Lenscher was raised as a normal kid until the World War II came along. Mm-hmm. And the official story is that he was in the Warsaw Ghetto, which is the hellhole that was depicted in
Film and Finished, yeah.
Film and Finished. When his parents died, and that was, if you've never seen Film and Finished, you can see what he went through. I like both portrayals. I mean, I adore Michael Fassbender in everything because of his portrayal of Magneto. I just think he's terrific. Mm-hmm. And he brings a different style of humanity than was brought to the character by the wonderful Ian McKellen, who plays him as a much older character.
Yeah.
But their philosophies are so different from between the two movies. You realize if you go by their really messed up timelines, do you really think Magneto, Ian McKellen, really would have been the one that assassinated JFK? Which is what he was in prison for in X-Men Days of Future Past.
Yeah.
Okay. That whole movie is messed up anyway. So it's like, it's great, but it's messed up. The character itself, knowing the tragic backstory and what happened, he just wants to be left in peace. And we see that in a big way in Apocalypse, which is not one of the better received films. But he's been living without using his abilities or anything for years at this point.
Right.
And it's a great, sensitive portrayal of the way that we see him and what he has to become again because of what happens in that film.
Right, because people are stupid.
Yeah.
Because people are dumb. I shouldn't say it like that, and I know some people will probably be angry with me for saying it that way, but it's like the whole thing that if, we've brought this up before, you and me, like if an alien spaceship landed in our backyard, we'd be all like, cool! Come have a pizza, let's talk about stuff. I think other places in this country, if they landed in somebody's backyard, it would be blam, 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 blam.
And if they landed anywhere else in the world, particularly in Stamford, Connecticut, the wrestling fans would all go, it's a work.
Yeah. I'm really pleased that he's so high on your list, though. But
number 2, Magneto
seriously.
from X-Men.
Okay. Number 2 on my list of tragic, misunderstood villains should actually surprise absolutely nobody, especially people who know me. My number 2 tragic, misunderstood character who is perceived as a villain, Godzilla.
I knew that was coming. I knew her top 2 from the very beginning.
From the Godzilla franchise of films. Godzilla's motivations...
There's nothing villainous about Godzilla.
Yes, but he's usually viewed as the antagonist in the film.
He is, but there's nothing villainous about him.
I don't think there is. Now, some people would argue you can't put villainy on an animal anyway because an animal doesn't have motivations like a human. I don't agree with that, and I also think Godzilla is a hell of a lot smarter than other people think he is.
Especially in the Legendary series.
Mm-hmm. Godzilla is, and I have mentioned this before, and I firmly believe this, Godzilla is nature's avatar. Godzilla is nature going, all right, that's it. You have effed around with this planet long enough, you arrogant little, two-legged, things that strut around with your, you strut around with your opposable thumbs and you think you own the place. And now you're screwing around with nuclear stuff that you don't understand. Okay, prepare for the spanking of a lifetime. And that's what comes out of Tokyo Bay, is the representation of nature's rage.
Except for in Shin Godzilla, which we're not going to talk about.
No, we're not. We're going to pretend that never happened. But Godzilla is oftentimes in the films, especially in Godzilla King of the Monsters, he is viewed as a villain. Or an antagonist. Maybe villain.
Is he viewed that way because... I'm assuming you're talking the old one, the original one.
Yes.
Is he viewed that way because that's the way Steve Martin frames it in his news stories?
No, he's viewed that way because he's knocking down a crap ton of buildings and killing people.
But I mean, as a villain, it might be thought of as not as a bad guy, but as a force of nature, which is what he should be thought of. That's why I don't have him on my list. I don't consider him a villain.
I don't consider him a villain either, simply because...
But, all the headlines that Steve Martin was calling into, United World Press and all this stuff, and they were all focused on, bad things happening from this big creature.
Right.
And, I think that led to the perception of bad guy.
My whole thing is that this is an animal that has come back to its home turf and found it incredibly changed and found itself not welcome anymore. Godzilla is in a world that he doesn't understand. And also, I think, especially in the Legendary series, when you physically look at the character of Godzilla, and all the people who were fat shaming, up yours. You thought I forgot about that, didn't you?
Talking about you, Owen Gleiberman and Jeff Wells.
You thought I forgot about that, didn't you, you SOBs? I didn't forget. If you look at the character and you look closely at him, the number of scars on his body and burns and things like that, this is a character that is probably in a lot of physical pain a lot of the time. This is a character... I don't know if I
agree with that.
Maybe not a lot.
In the past, yes,
He's
but
been
not
through
now.
a lot of battles.
Yeah.
And probably had to deal with a lot of it alone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the risk of, again...
Well, alone in the Legendary series, alone up front, he's always had the Monarch team watching him since the very beginning.
What I mean by alone is in he's the only one of his kind.
Right, yeah. I just want to say that.
How would you feel? How would you feel?
You see the intelligence he has in the Legendary series. Yeah. In the scene in the most recent film, Godzilla King of the Monsters, now out on DVD. If you haven't seen it, watch it. There is a scene 2/3 of the way through the film, I don't want to give anything away, where Godzilla connects with what's the character's name? Ken Watanabe's character.
Oh, Dr. Serizawa.
Dr. Serizawa literally connects with him.
Yeah.
And you can see he knows what is going on.
Yeah.
So
it's a living, breathing, thinking creature. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying he doesn't cause damage. He does. I'm not saying he doesn't wind up killing people. I don't think that's done on purpose. And I've always felt bad for him because I was always like, he's alone.
Right.
And you and I both know that loneliness can really hurt.
Yeah.
So my number 2, Godzilla.
Okay. You want to just go ahead and do your number 1 and get it out of the way?
No, you do. No.
All right. My number 1 is a character that nobody's going to expect, I hope. But I was just thinking through this list, and I'm like, he doesn't mean to be a villain, and he's not. And he's doing it for the reasons that are altruistic.
Well, you know where the road of paved with good intentions goes.
Well, in this case, that's true up to a point. But when you've spent your entire life being bullied, beaten on, your self-esteem gone straight into the toilet. And then you suddenly find yourself with new abilities that makes you wonder, maybe I have a shot now. And through circumstance, you are forced to use those abilities to do things you don't want to do, but there's no other way around it. And you get caught doing it, and these abilities are also slowly driving you insane. Then that's where it happens. My number one, Andrew Detmer, from the second best found footage film of all time, Chronicle. Dane DeHaan has an amazing tour de force in this role. Andrew is a sensitive 16-year-old kid. He's a videographer who is, screamed at and beaten on by his dad. He's picked on by the bullies at school. His only friend is his cousin until a party they talk him into going to, where he ends up becoming friends with one of the hot jocks at school thanks to his cousin. And the three of them end up imbued with telekinetic and telepathic abilities because of this rock they find underground. Andrew is not trying to be a villain. His mother is dying of cancer, his father is an asshole, and he wants to try and make his mother better as he grows more and more into it. He starts doing stupid things, robbing gas stations and stuff to try and pay for his treatments. And then when he gets caught doing it, and his dad is just like, "Oh, you're scum," whatever, he ends up throwing his dad out the window of the hospital, 9 stories or whatever.
Yeah.
He's a really tragic character and one that you feel for, because he does end up dead at the end of the story at 17, and only because he was trying to do the right thing but didn't know how to control it. And eventually was starting, as everybody, that horrified gasp that came when he pulled the spider apart as he's talking about becoming an alpha predator.
Yeah, see, that's the one thing I want to bring up.
That his mindset is changing. As I said, it's driving him slowly insane.
Right. But the thing is, before the spider bit, which was the point where I'm like, yeah, never mind the slippery slope, we've jumped right into...
The whole audience was...
Yeah.
I mean, that was a collective...
Do you remember what he did right before that? He ripped the bully's teeth out of his head.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah.
With his telekinesis.
Right, but again...
And that again is dealing with the idea of pain, like I mentioned before.
Right.
It's a human thing. We get hurt, we lash out.
This character helped turn Dane DeHaan into a working actor that is everywhere.
Yes.
And is just an amazing part and amazing character. And it is only found footage movie that is up there with Troll Hunter as a really excellent found footage film, in my own personal opinion. Number 1 on my sympathetic villains list, Andrew Detmer from Chronicle.
No, that's a terrific choice. I wish I had thought of that, because that's really great. My number 1, you've already mentioned, and again, surprise to absolutely nobody. Yep, my number 1 tragic villain is Darth Vader, aka Anakin Skywalker from the Star Wars films. The reason that Anakin and Vader are so high on my list is because...
It's Star Wars.
No, not because it's Star Wars. The reason that he's so high on my list is the simple fact that the reason that he gives into the dark side, basically sells his soul to the devil, or Emperor Palpatine, depending on your point of view.
Well, same thing.
Same thing, pretty much.
In that universe.
Is not for power, not for vengeance, not for anything like that. It's for love. It's, and that is just so sad. It's so incredibly, it really is tragic.
It is, yeah.
It's a complete tragedy when you think about, and then when you think about the fact that he has, completely gone off the rails, done one of the most unimaginable things possible with the whole killing of the younglings in the Jedi Temple, which is one of those, okay, how are we supposed to explain this kind of things? And then, because he's so drunk on the dark side, winds up almost killing the person that he's gone through all of this for, because he feels like she's betrayed him when he force chokes a pregnant Padme into unconsciousness because he thinks that she has brought Obi-Wan to him to fight him, you know? And it's so heartbreaking. I mean, and it all finally comes full circle at the end of Return of the Jedi when he does sacrifice himself to save Luke. And the whole thing where Luke's saying, you know, I've got to save you. And Vader looks at him, and it's not Vader anymore, it's Anakin.
Again.
And he looks at him and he says, you already have. And that's beautiful.
She starts every time.
That is beautiful, but it's still so tragic. And like I said, when you think about the fact that all this happened out of love, I mean, not the most sane love. I mean, I guess kind of bordering on obsession. But let's be honest, it's your wife. You know? You're going to do anything to try and save someone.
It's even weirder love when you consider their relationship in Phantom Menace.
Yeah, I don't know how he's like a little tiny kid and she's, you know...
It's her people.
I guess. And then when they meet up again, she doesn't look any different and he's all grown up, you know, which is okay. Or more grown up.
Ew.
Yeah, I know. My number 10 most tragic villain, Anakin Skywalker, who became Darth Vader.
Is anybody
in the Star Wars
surprised
films.
by her top 2? No.
Probably not.
My top 10 in order, from 10 to 1. Plankton from SpongeBob SquarePants. Kylo Ren from Star Wars. Mr. Freeze, Batman. Johnny Lawrence from The Karate Kid. Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader from Star Wars, Dr. Octopus from Spider-Man, Gollum from Lord of the Rings, Henry Frankenstein from the 1930 film Frankenstein, number 2, Magneto, X-Men, and number 1, Andrew Detmer from Chronicle.
Okay. On my list from 10 to 1, Charlie Evans from the original Star Trek series, number 9, Raul Silva, number 8, Dr. Octopus, number 7, Gollum, number 6, Frankenstein's monster, number 5, Harley Quinn, number 4, Magneto, number 3, Mr. Freeze, specifically from Batman the Animated Series, number 2, Godzilla, and number 1, Darth Vader.
Woo! Another list in the books.
Yeah.
And
we'd love to know your list. If you have any lists like this.
Please send us an idea for a list. You could get a prize. You get your name on the site. Get your name on the show.
Or even if
all your friends listen to us. And
even if you don't have a list, if you have opinions about our list, if you think, hey, those lists were great, or you all need help.
We'll even include you in our Twitter release for the show.
Yeah.
So, you know, and don't forget to send your Twitter handle if you're going to send in a list to frontrow@PNRNetworks.com or subjectcinema@PNRNetworks.com.
Yep.
We hope you'll continue to listen and watch all of our stuff on our regular shows. Subject Cinema on Sundays. Mondays will be Catastrophe Vortex again this week. Tuesday Digidex. Wednesday, Ring Around the Rosie. Thursday, we do this show, Front Row. Friday is 3-Minute Weekend, and Saturday is Platinum Rose's Garden.
Well, that will be coming back, but you can listen to it.
Plus Cavebabble on any varied weekend day.
Yep.
And Anthony's stuff when he gets back to doing it again. He's doing changing his mind again. So we'll have to wait and see. And
if you would like to listen to our more dramatic bents, because we're bent enough as it is, you can check out our YouTube channel. You can look for our dramatic works, which include Manhattan Hammerdown As It Happened, and our take on the H.G. Wells classic, The War of the Worlds.
And another new one coming this October. With the cast of the PNR Networks shows.
The PNR Networks players.
Yeah, pretty much. So next week we'll have another great list for you, and we hope you'll join us this weekend for Subject Cinema. Right now we've got our Rising Stars list up from last week, and this coming week we'll have our fall movie preview.
Yep.
And a lot more as the year goes on, as we kind of get back into full-time, full-steam power, and we hope that you'll be there with us.
Yep. And until next week, I'm Kim Brown.
I'm T.C. Kirkham.
And we hope we can count on you to come back next week and help us count up another list here on Front Row 5 and 10.
Count on it.
You've been listening to Front Row 5 and 10 with Kim Brown and T.C. Kirkham.
podcasting's choice. From coast to coast, continent to continent, right here 24/7.